What if your name is already written somewhere you cannot reach with ordinary waking consciousness? A record that encodes everything you have done with your awareness in this life, that carries the full weight of every moment you were truly present and every moment you were not, and that contains the single determination ancient seers described as the difference between those who persist and those who are dissolved back into the field, unnamed, unrecorded, as if they never passed through at all. In ancient Egypt, a specific image was considered so important that it was carved into temple walls, painted across papyrus scrolls, and placed in the burial chambers of pharaohs and priests alike. A soul stands in a great hall before a scale. On one side of the scale rests the heart, the entire accumulated experience of a human life. On the other side rests a single white feather. This was not decorative mythology. This was the central cosmological teaching of the entire civilization. What they were mapping in that image was something they considered more real than physical existence, and more consequential than any earthly judgment. The popular version of the Akashic Records has replaced the ancient teaching with something significantly smaller. In most contemporary spiritual circles, the records are described as a cosmic database, a spiritual library where everything is stored, accessible to psychics, intuitives, and those with the right frequency. Go in, read your soul contracts, discover your past lives, understand your karmic patterns. The ancient seers described something fundamentally different, not a passive repository you visit for information, but an active encoding field that responds to the quality of consciousness you bring to experience. The difference between these two descriptions changes everything about what you should do with the blood moon window open right now. Before we go deeper into what the ancient traditions actually taught, if this kind of knowledge speaks to you, the real mechanism beneath the spiritual, the teaching beneath the symbol, subscribe to this channel. This is where we keep building on this work together. Hit the bell so you don't miss what comes next. When the Vedic scholars of ancient India wrote the word Akasha, they were naming something specific in the cosmological grammar of their tradition. The word comes from the Sanskrit root kash, meaning to shine, to radiate luminosity. Akasha was not a metaphor for a spiritual library. It was the fifth and most fundamental of the five elements, the luminous substratum from which all other elements emerge, the medium through which all vibrations propagate. In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the dimension Patanjali calls the Akashic field is the substrate in which impressions, samskaras, are encoded. But what the Vedic seers understood about this encoding contains something that modern versions of the concept have largely erased. The depth of what is written in the field depends entirely on the quality of conscious awareness brought to the experience that created the impression. What exactly is encoded and how? The Vedic answer differs from the popular modern version in one critical respect. The tradition did not describe a neutral recording medium that stores everything with equal fidelity. It described a field of causal impressions in which the depth of encoding varies directly with the degree of conscious presence the person brought to each experience. An event passed through in full conscious awareness, seen clearly, felt completely understood, leaves what the tradition called a deep samskara. An event passed through in unconscious habit, not observed, not felt, not examined, leaves only a surface impression. The Vedic teaching holds that across a lifetime, it is the deep samskaras that constitute the essential Akashic encoding of the soul. The surface impressions dissolve. Only what was truly seen persists. Return to the Egyptian scale. The soul stands before the hall of two truths, the weighing chamber of Ma'at, and the heart is placed against the feather. But what exactly was being weighed? The Egyptian word Ma'at is routinely translated as truth or justice. Both translations are inadequate. Ma'at in the original cosmological sense means the principle of alignment with what is real, cosmic order, the actual nature of things, the structure of reality as it genuinely is, rather than as fear or desire or self-deception has distorted it. The feather of Ma'at is not the feather of virtue, it is the feather of seeing clearly. What was being weighed was the degree to which the soul had genuinely seen itself, had encountered its own nature directly without the protective layers of unconscious distortion. The popular image of this scene positions it as moral judgment, the good soul rewarded with paradise, the sinful soul devoured by Amit the Destroyer. That interpretation maps a Christian framework of sin and reward onto an Egyptian cosmological teaching that was describing something far more specific, a heart made heavy by unexamined self-deception, by years of unconscious reaction, by the accumulated weight of patterns the person never turned toward, by the density of the unseen. Does not fail the weighing because it sinned. It fails because it cannot match the lightness of the feather. A feather has no weight because it holds nothing it has not examined. The heart that has genuinely seen itself, that has brought honesty to its own nature with sufficient consistency, becomes correspondingly light, not through perfection, through seeing. The Hermetic tradition adds a third layer to the same observation. Thoth, the divine scribe in the Egyptian cosmological system, later absorbed into the Hermetic tradition as the originator of all sacred knowledge, was described as the keeper of a record that modern scholars have called the Book of Thoth. What Thoth was recording, in the Hermetic understanding, was not a catalogue of actions and omissions. He was recording the degree of alignment between what the soul genuinely knew and how the soul genuinely lived, the integrity of what the Hermetic tradition called logos, a word that encompasses not just reason or speech, but the full correspondence between inner knowing, expressed being, and action in the world. A soul whose logos was integrated, whose knowing and being and acting were aligned, left a complete and distinct encoding in the divine record. A soul whose logos was fractured left something incomplete. 3 traditions, 3 names, 3 geographic and cultural contexts separated by centuries and the entire width of the ancient Mediterranean world. Akashic Records, Hall of Two Truths, Book of Thoth. None of these traditions had contact with the others in the periods when these teachings were formulated in their core forms, and all 3 arrived at the same underlying observation, described with the same underlying logic, that reality itself encodes the degree of conscious awareness brought to the life being lived, and that this encoding determines something the traditions described without euphemism, whether what the soul expressed during its passage through physical existence leaves a distinct, persistent mark in the field, or dissolves back into it without trace. What unifies the 3 frameworks is not their imagery or their cosmological vocabulary. What unifies them is the mechanism. Depth of encoding correlates directly with quality of conscious awareness. This is not a moral claim. It is not a claim about whether a person was good or bad, successful or unsuccessful, spiritually advanced or spiritually naive. It is a precise claim about a specific quality of engagement with experience, the quality the Vedic tradition called Sakshi Bhava, witness consciousness, the quality the Egyptian tradition called knowing Ma'at, the quality the Hermetic tradition called gnosis. In each tradition the name is different, the description is identical, the state of seeing clearly, without the filtering distortions of unconscious habit, what is actually present. If something in this is already resonating, if part of you recognizes what these 3 traditions are pointing at, write in the comments, "My name is written." That recognition right now is exactly what this video is about. What determines who is written and who is erased? 3 independent traditions converging on the same answer might suggest the answer is complex. The answer is not complex. Written does not mean morally superior. It does not mean spiritually accomplished by any external measure. It describes a quality of engagement with experience, specifically the decision to bring conscious awareness to what is happening, rather than passing through life in the managed autopilot that the traditions describe as the precise mechanism of erasure. That decision can be made at any point, under any circumstances, in any life. The traditions do not specify what form the examination should take. They specify only the quality it must have, genuine honesty, not performed reflection, not spiritual exercise, actual seeing. You already know the difference between the two modes of existence being described here, not as abstract knowledge, as lived experience. There have been moments in your life when you were entirely present, when you saw something about yourself or your situation with crystalline clarity, when a decision was made from genuine awareness rather than habitual reaction, when an experience was fully felt and fully integrated rather than managed and stored. Those moments felt qualitatively different from ordinary life. In those moments, something was happening in you that did not happen during the rest. The Vedic seers would say, in those moments you were encoding deeply. In those moments, something was being written. The question the ancient traditions are raising is, how many of those moments has your life contained? The Vedic concept of samskaras provides the most granular mechanism for what the Hall of Two Truths is describing symbolically. A samskara is a groove, literally in Sanskrit, an impression made in the consciousness field by an experience. The depth of the groove determines whether the impression endures. Deep samskaras, born of experience brought to full conscious awareness, fully observed, fully felt, genuinely understood, constitute the essential encoding of a soul's Akashic signature. Surface impressions, born of experience passed through in habitual reaction, never truly examined, dissolve when the conditions that generated them are removed. The Yoga Vasista, the ancient Vedic text attributed to the sage Vasista, teaches this distinction through an image. Some things are written in stone, some written in water. When the water stills, the writing in water is gone. What was written in stone remains when everything else has passed. The distinction between deep and surface encoding is not about meditation or spiritual practice in the way the modern wellness industry uses those terms. The traditions are not describing the gap between those who have a spiritual practice and those who don't. They are describing the gap between those who bring conscious awareness to their experience. Any experience, in any domain, in any form of life, and those who move through their lives in managed unconsciousness. A person who has never sat in formal meditation, but who has spent years genuinely examining their patterns, their motivations, their self-deceptions, with honest attention, that person is accumulating deep samskaras. They are, in the language of the tradition, being written. A person who meditates daily but uses the practice as another form of psychological management rather than genuine self-examination. Nothing deep is being encoded. What the ancient traditions describe as erasure is not a punishment imposed from outside. This is the aspect of the teaching that most modern treatments of the Akashic Records avoid because it is uncomfortable. The traditions do not describe a divine judge who decides which souls are worth preserving and which are not. They describe a mechanism, a person who has lived entirely in unconscious reaction, who has never turned the light of genuine awareness toward their own patterns, motivations, self-deceptions, leaves no deep impressions in the Akashic field. The encoding is shallow. When the physical vehicle ends, there is nothing sufficiently consolidated to constitute a distinct and persistent presence in the field. Not punishment, not divine judgment. Entropy, the same principle by which anything that has not been sufficiently organized returns to the unorganized state, it came from. Right now, a response is forming somewhere in you to what was just described. That response is itself information. It may be resistance, the feeling that this cannot be right, that the universe does not work this way, that every person persists regardless. Or it may be recognition, the quiet, uncomfortable certainty that you have always sensed the difference between living and truly living, between passing through an experience and actually encountering it. Both responses are worth examining. The tradition would observe that even the quality of how you receive a challenging teaching, with genuine openness or with the defensive closure of a mind protecting what it already believes, is itself being encoded. The Akashic field is not recording what happens to you. It is recording the quality of consciousness you bring to what happens to you. If this content is speaking to you, if the mechanism beneath the ancient teaching is landing with the weight it deserves, let me know by liking this video. It helps more people find this work at the right moment. The Egyptian negative confession, the 42 declarations made before the gods in the Hall of Two Truths, is standard described as a moral checklist. The soul claims not to have committed the listed transgressions. I have not stolen, I have not murdered, I have not committed adultery. This interpretation positions the Egyptian cosmological teaching as a precursor to the Ten Commandments, a divine law code, a moral inventory. The actual function of the 42 declarations is more specific and more illuminating. The declarations are not a list of prohibited actions. They are a map of the forms that self-deception and unconscious behavior take. I have not acted without reflection. I have not failed to see what I was doing. I have not made my mind impure. The confession is not a catalogue of sins. It is a description of the examined versus the unexamined life, rendered in the specific vocabulary of what unconsciousness looks like in practice. The Hermetic Book of Thoth was not a literal book. In the understanding preserved in the Hermetic tradition and the Corpus Hermeticum, the collection of Greco-Egyptian philosophical texts, Thoth recorded the degree to which the soul's expressed nature had achieved integrity with its essential nature. The Hermetic concept at the center of this teaching is logos, not merely word or reason, but the full alignment between what a person genuinely knows, who they genuinely are, and how they genuinely act. A soul whose logos was integrated, whose knowing and being and expressing were aligned, who lived consistently from their actual nature rather than performing a socially constructed version of themselves, left a complete encoding. A soul whose logos was fractured, who understood but refused to apply, who knew one thing and consistently lived another, left something incomplete in the record. The Book of Thoth was recording the integrity of the soul's self-expression, not its moral performance, its authenticity. What determines who achieves this alignment? The ancient traditions are consistent on this point, and the answer is less mystical than the framing might suggest. The determining factor is a decision. Specifically, the decision to turn the light of awareness toward the self, not as a one-time act, not as the completion of a formal spiritual practice, as a quality brought consistently to ordinary experience, the choice to see what is actually operating in you, rather than managing the appearance of what is operating in you. The traditions do not specify that this decision must be made in a temple or during an eclipse or in the presence of a teacher. They specify only that it must be made, and followed through with genuine honesty before the window closes. Not the blood moon window, the window of the life. Your name, as the ancient Seers used the word, is not the name your parents gave you. Your name, in the Akashic sense, is the specific quality of consciousness you have expressed in this life, the unique pattern of awareness, attention, and self-examination that makes your encoding distinct from every other consciousness that has passed through the field. The ancient question is not were you good, it is were you present, not did you achieve, but did you see. The difference between a name that is written and a name that is erased is not moral virtue accumulated over a lifetime, it is the weight of the moments, recurring, cumulative, ordinary and extraordinary alike. When you chose to look at yourself and your life clearly rather than continuing in the more comfortable unreality of not looking. The Vedic seer Vasistha, in the text bearing his name, describes the Akashic encoding through an image of precision. He teaches that the consciousness field retains what has been illuminated by awareness and releases what has been passed through in unconsciousness. The same way sunlight falling on a surface leaves no trace when it passes, but heat absorbed into stone persists long after the sun has moved. Conscious experience that is fully felt, seen and integrated is absorbed into the soul's essential structure. Experience that is habitually reacted to, never truly examined, passes through without absorption. The distinction is not between pleasant experiences and painful ones, not between spiritually significant events and mundane ones. It is between experiences met with genuine awareness and experiences met with the absence of genuine awareness. The world does not determine what gets written. The quality of presence brought to the world does. The modern spiritual marketplace has reversed the ancient teaching in a way that makes it ineffective. The popular understanding focuses on accessing the Akashic Records to receive information, discovering past lives, reading soul contracts, learning what the cosmos has planned. The ancient teaching was oriented entirely differently. The primary work of Akashic engagement, in every tradition that preserved it in functional form, was not reading the records. It was writing them, not accessing the field to extract what it contains, but contributing to it through the quality of consciousness brought to present experience. The ancient seers were not primarily interested in what was already encoded. They were interested in the quality of what you were encoding right now, in this life, in this moment, in this window. That specific quality of seeing, the kind that generates deep Akashic encoding rather than surface impression, has a texture that is recognizable from the inside. The Vedic tradition describes it as dristi, a quality of seeing that is luminous, clear, without the contamination of wish or fear. A moment of genuine dristi has a specific quality, something that has been seen before but never clearly suddenly becomes fully visible. Something that has been operating below the threshold of honest acknowledgement suddenly arrives into conscious recognition. The moment is usually quiet rather than dramatic. It does not announce itself, but what it produces in the consciousness field, in the Akashic record, is described by the tradition as irreversible. What has been truly seen cannot be unseen. That irreversibility is the nature of the deep samskara. If you've been working with these teachings and still feel like something is blocking your ability to move from understanding to genuine application, like the knowledge is reaching your mind but not yet reorganizing your patterns, I left something for you in the first pinned comment. It's for those who are ready for the next level of this work. Ancient seers across multiple traditions identified specific astronomical conditions as windows during which the threshold between ordinary waking consciousness and the Akashic field became temporarily more permeable. The blood moon occupied a specific position in this mapping. Egyptian temple records from the New Kingdom period describe total lunar eclipses as the eye of Ra closing, a phrase that pointed not to danger, but to access. The moment when the dominance of ordinary visible light was interrupted, and something of the deeper substrate of reality became briefly audible beneath the noise of daily existence. Vedic texts from multiple periods describe lunar eclipse windows as times of heightened samskara formation. moments when impressions made with even moderate conscious awareness went unusually deep into the Akashic field. Something about the blood moon has always felt significant to those who encounter it consciously, not because it is the most dramatic astronomical event. The night sky has produced events of greater visual impact. Something subtler is operating. The altered quality of light, the quality of atmospheric quiet, the particular character of awareness that the blood moon window produces. These create a condition in which the ordinary cognitive noise that prevents genuine self-examination temporarily abates. In that unusual quiet, something becomes accessible that is normally covered by the sound of forward momentum, obligation, and the endless business of ordinary life. The ancient traditions called this access. Modern neuroscience calls it the theta state. Both descriptions are pointing to the same window, the same temporary opening in the wall between ordinary consciousness and what lies beneath it. What does accessing the Akashic field during a blood moon mean in practical terms? The tradition's answer, translated from ritual language into mechanism, is not what most contemporary discussions describe. It does not mean receiving psychic downloads. It does not mean opening to past life information or cosmic guidance. It means entering the field with a quality of conscious awareness sufficient to contribute to the encoding, to bring to your present experience the kind of attention that converts surface impression into deep samskara, that converts written in water into written in stone. The blood moon is not primarily an access window for extracting information. It is primarily an access window for contributing to the record, for doing with unusual depth and precision exactly what the ancient Seers described as the mechanism of Akashic inscription, seeing clearly what you are without the filters that ordinary daylight maintains. This reframing inverts the standard blood moon practice in a way that matters more than it might initially appear. If the primary value of the blood moon is what you can receive, visions, messages, information about your higher path, then the practice is oriented toward passivity. You sit, you open, you receive. But if the primary value is the opportunity for unusually deep encoding through the quality of conscious awareness you bring to your own experience, then the practice is oriented toward active, honest self-examination, not performance, not ceremony. The specific quality of seeing that the ancient Seers identified as the mechanism by which names get written into the deepest layers of the field. The blood moon does not deliver the writing. You bring it to the window. The blood moon provides the conditions under which what you bring goes deeper than it could on any ordinary night. During the New Kingdom period in Egypt, priests conducted what temple records describe as the weighing of the living heart. Not a posthumous ritual, but a practice undertaken during specific astronomical windows, including total lunar eclipses. The priest would sit in the inner sanctum during the period of eclipse totality, in complete darkness, and conduct what can only be described as a living version of the Mayat examination. A clear-eyed review of the patterns, the self-deceptions, the moments of unconscious reaction, the gap between who he knew himself to be and how he had actually been behaving in the period since the last major astronomical window. Not as confession, not as penance, as inventory, the same kind of precise, non-judgmental seeing that generates the deep samskaras the Vedic tradition described. Whatever was genuinely seen during that examination, the tradition held, was encoded at a depth that ordinary consciousness could not reach. Whatever remained unseen was not. The blood moon window is an opportunity for what the Egyptian tradition called knowing ma'at, a phrase that resists accurate translation into English because knowing here does not mean intellectual comprehension. It means direct, unflinching encounter with what is real, recognizing what you actually are rather than what you prefer to believe you are, recognizing the patterns that operate in you without your conscious endorsement. recognizing the gap between the values you profess and the choices you actually make. The Egyptian teaching does not ask for this recognition to be comfortable. It asks only for it to be genuine. This recognition, brought to full conscious awareness in the specific neurological and electromagnetic conditions the blood moon produces, constitutes a deep samskara in the Vedic sense. Something that has been brought into honest awareness in a high-access window becomes written in stone. The question the ancient seers would ask you in this window is not, what do you want to call in? It is not, what intention are you setting? It is, what have you been refusing to see? The blood moon is not primarily a window for requesting things from the cosmos. It is primarily a window for seeing clearly, seeing yourself clearly, your patterns clearly, the specific ways your life is diverging from what you genuinely know to be true about yourself. That seeing is the mechanism, not a preparation for something else, not a step toward a more important spiritual experience. The seeing itself, done with the quality of honest attention the traditions describe, is the Akashic inscription. The blood moon window is one of the few windows in which that inscription goes deep enough to matter. Among the practices specific to the Hermetic system was one called the ascent through the spheres, a structured self-examination conducted in ascending layers, each layer representing a different level of conditioning that the soul carried. At each level, the practitioner examined what attachment, what false identification, what unconscious belief was being dissolved by genuine recognition. The Hermetic tradition held that what was genuinely released, truly seen, honestly acknowledged, no longer needed for the construction of false identity, was permanently encoded in the Akashic record as evidence of the soul's essential nature becoming visible. What was merely performed, acknowledged in ritual without genuine interior recognition, left no lasting impression whatsoever. The Hermetic teachers were explicit about this. The mechanism was not the ritual. The ritual was scaffolding. The mechanism was the quality of recognition the ritual was designed to facilitate. The difficulty most practitioners encounter with this teaching is not intellectual. The teaching itself is not complicated. The difficulty is that genuine self-examination requires something that feels genuinely dangerous until a person has done it enough times to know otherwise. The willingness to see what is actually there rather than what one prefers to see. The Hermetic ascent through the spheres failed consistently for practitioners who performed the outer structure of the practice with precision while maintaining the inner structure of self-protective avoidance. The tradition is explicit. The sphere does not release what is not genuinely seen. The record does not encode what has not been genuinely brought into awareness. A ritual performed without honest recognition produces no Akashic inscription at all. The mechanism is recognition. The ritual is only the container for it. What does genuine self-examination look like in practice, specifically in a blood moon window? Translated from the ritual language of three ancient traditions into the practical instruction they share. Bring your attention to the patterns in your life that are operating without your full conscious awareness. The recurring reactions, the persistent conflicts that reappear in different forms with different people, the gap between your values and your actual choices, the behaviors you explain to yourself and others, but that keep repeating despite the explanations. Bring these into attention, not to judge them, not to immediately change them, to see them, with the quality of clear, non-reactive awareness that the traditions call witnessing. Then articulate what you see, internally, in writing, with precision. The articulation is not a separate step. The articulation is the encoding. The act of putting honest words to what you see is the act of writing in stone. In the Vedic tradition, a specific practice for lunar eclipse windows was prescribed across multiple lineages. During the period of totality, The practitioner would enter a meditative state and systematically bring to conscious attention the experiences of the preceding weeks and months. Where was I fully present during this period? Where was I passing through on autopilot? What did I see clearly? What was I shown that I chose not to acknowledge? What patterns operated in me without my full awareness? The Vedic teaching holds that each item brought into honest conscious examination during this review was being converted, in real time, in the elevated access conditions of the eclipse window, from a surface impression into a deep samskara, from something written in water into something written in stone. The blood moon was treated as a conversion window, not for spiritual achievement, for the quality of seeing that makes the conversion possible. You already know which patterns are running without your full endorsement. You don't need a psychic reading to identify them, and you don't need a spiritual teacher to point them out. They are the thoughts that surface at 3 in the morning when the noise of ordinary life is quiet enough to hear them. They are the reactions that surprise you with their intensity when they arrive. They are the choices you make repeatedly despite knowing their cost. They are the clarity about someone or something in your life that keeps arriving and that you keep translating into something you can live with, rather than something you have to act on. In this blood moon window, with the theta state open, with the neurological filters reduced, these patterns are closer to the surface than they will be for months. The question is whether you turn toward them or away. The specific teaching that distinguishes the ancient tradition from most modern spiritual practice is this one. The patterns you see clearly in the light of genuine honest awareness are not problems requiring immediate resolution. They are, in the precise language of the Vedic tradition, samskaras becoming conscious. The moment of clear seeing is not the beginning of a process of change that will eventually matter. It is itself a form of completion. A pattern that was encoded unconsciously is being re-encoded consciously. The thing that was written in water is being written in stone, not because you have fixed the pattern, because you have genuinely seen it, without the filters of self-protection, self-condemnation, or the explanatory distancing that prevents true recognition. The re-encoding is the practice. The practice does not produce something that will eventually matter. It is the thing that matters. Blood moon windows are not deadlines. The Akashic field is not a test with a fixed closing time after which the opportunity is permanently lost. What the ancient traditions describe is a recurring astronomical window, appearing with predictable frequency, during which the conditions for deep encoding are more favorable than at any other point in the lunar cycle. What you bring to this window is not your accumulated spiritual achievement. It is not your progress on a path. It is your willingness in this specific window to bring genuine honesty to the examination of your own patterns. The tradition does not promise that one night of honest self-seeing changes everything. It teaches that each act of genuine recognition brought into the field during a high-access window contributes to the weight of what is written. The record builds across windows, years, lifetimes. Each one missed is a missed contribution. Each one used adds weight that does not dissolve when the window closes. The Tibetan tradition preserves, in the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a teaching that directly parallels the Egyptian weighing of the heart. At the moment of death, according to the tradition, the consciousness encounters the clear light of the Dharmata, a luminosity that reveals the essential nature of mind with absolute clarity and without distortion. The souls who recognize this clear light for what it is merge with it. Their encoding is complete. What they genuinely were is fully expressed and fully received. The souls who do not recognize it, who recoil from the intensity of unmediated reality, who turn away into familiar habitual patterns, who cannot meet directly what they have always been, cycle back into form. The teaching is unambiguous about the mechanism. Recognition at the moment of death is only possible for those who have practiced recognition throughout life. You cannot achieve at death a quality of seeing you have not cultivated in living. What all four traditions share as their practical instruction is simpler than the layers of cosmological teaching that surround it. Begin with recognition. Not with achievement, not with performance, not with the accumulation of spiritual knowledge or the completion of sacred practices. Begin with the willingness to see what is actually present in your own experience, with the same quality of clear, honest attention that you would bring to any situation where you needed to know the truth. That quality of attention, applied to the self, is what all four traditions describe as the mechanism of Akashic inscription. The blood moon window makes this attention easier to access than at any other point in the lunar cycle. The window is open right now. Recognition is what is being asked for. The title asked three questions. Who is written there? Who gets erased? And what did the ancient seers instruct to do in this window? You now have the answer all three traditions give. Written. Those who bring conscious awareness to their experience consistently enough that the Akashic field encodes their essential nature at depth. Those whose names, in the ancient seers' language, become permanent marks in the luminous substrate. Erased. Those who pass through their lives in sufficient unconsciousness that nothing deep enough to persist accumulates. Not condemned but dissolved. Returned to the unorganized state by the entropy of never having been truly seen. And the instruction for this window, see with the quality of honest attention the traditions describe. Whatever you see clearly in this window goes deeper than any ordinary night. That is what the blood moon window is for. You are in this window right now. The blood moon's altered light has elevated melatonin production, opened the theta brainwave state, and reduced the prefrontal filtering that normally keeps uncomfortable self-knowledge below the threshold of conscious awareness. These are the same conditions the ancient seers identified as windows of deepest encoding, the same neurological environment in which Egyptian priests conducted the living weighing of the heart, in which Vedic practitioners converted surface impressions into deep samskaras. The neuroscience and the ancient tradition are not describing two different phenomena. They are describing the same opening, one in the language of hormone chemistry and brainwave oscillation, the other in the language of initiation and cosmic record-keeping. The window is the same. It is open in you right now. What then should someone do with the remaining time in this blood moon window? Three ancient traditions, stripped of their ritual language, give the same practical instruction. Take available time, however much of the window remains, and bring it to conditions that support genuine self-examination, darkness, stillness, the deliberate absence of stimulation. Bring your attention not to what you want to receive from the cosmos, but to what you have been avoiding examining within yourself. Not to analyze it, not to solve it, not to construct a plan for change, to see it with the quality of honest, non-reactive awareness the traditions call witnessing. Then write down what you see with precision. The writing is not a record for later review. In this window, what you articulate honestly encodes more deeply than words written on any ordinary night. The ancient seers' prescribed practice for this window is different from what most contemporary discussions call blood moon ritual. Crystals, ceremonies, manifestation lists, none of these are wrong. But none of them are the practice the traditions identified as the mechanism of Akashic inscription. The ancient seers did not instruct practitioners to bring a list of desires to the field. They instructed them to sit in honest darkness and look at themselves clearly, to bring to the surface, with full conscious attention, the material that the ordinary day keeps below the threshold of honest sight. The outer form, the silence, the darkness, the deliberate stillness, was always in service of one inner function: genuine recognition. Without the recognition, the form produces nothing that persists. The Akashic field, as all three traditions describe it, cannot be manipulated. It does not respond to requests to change what has already been encoded, to erase negative karma through ceremony, to install the impression of virtues that have not been cultivated through actual experience. What responds to genuine engagement is straightforward. The quality of conscious awareness brought to present experience determines the depth of encoding. You cannot write yourself into the records through ritual. You cannot accelerate the process through spiritual ambition. The only currency the field recognizes is genuine recognition. The quality of honest self-seeing that the Vedic tradition calls Sakshi Bhava, the Egyptian tradition calls knowing Ma'at, and the Hermetic tradition calls Gnosis. The blood moon window makes this quality more available than usual, but only you can bring it. The ancient Seers, whose names appear in the deepest layers of traditional records, were not distinguished by their spiritual accomplishments as modern culture would measure them. They were not the ones who performed the most elaborate ceremonies, accumulated the most sacred knowledge, or achieved the most dramatic mystical experiences. They were the ones who looked at themselves with the most sustained honesty, who encountered what was uncomfortable in themselves without immediately turning away, who brought the light of awareness to the darkness of their own patterns with sufficient consistency that genuine seeing accumulated into something that persists. The Akashic record is not impressed by performance. It is not written by achievement. It is written only by recognition. The Mahabharata, the ancient Indian epic that maps dharma, consciousness, and the cosmic order with unusual precision, contains a figure whose presence in the tradition is noted with specific meaning. Vidura, the counselor in the epic, is not a warrior or a great practitioner of austerities. He is described consistently as a man of extraordinary honesty, honesty about what he saw, honesty about himself, honesty in counsel, even when the truth was unwelcome. The Vedic tradition described this quality, viveka, discriminative awareness, applied with consistent honesty, as the primary mechanism of Akashic inscription. Not power, not achievement, not spiritual gift. The precision and consistency with which the self and the world are seen clearly and reported truly. What you have encountered in this video is not a new spiritual system. It is a description from three independent ancient traditions of a mechanism you have always experienced directly, because you have felt the difference between the moments when you were fully present and the moments when you were not. The experience that changed something in you permanently versus the experience that passed through without a trace. The ancient seers were mapping that difference with the conceptual tools available to them. What they built, the Hall of Two Truths, the Akashic Field, the Book of Thoth, were maps of a territory you have always lived in, whether or not you had a name for it. What this video provides is the name. The territory has always been yours. Three traditions agree on one thing with unusual specificity. The window for this work is not unlimited, not because there is a cosmic deadline that closes at a predetermined moment, but because the accumulated weight of unconscious patterning has a progressive effect on access. The longer genuine self-examination is deferred, the thicker the layers of habitual reaction that must be moved through to reach genuine recognition. The ancient seers used blood moon windows precisely because these conditions reduced the thickness of those layers temporarily, because the elevated theta state and reduced prefrontal gating created a brief, natural access that would otherwise require extended practice to achieve. Each window used compresses that journey. Each window missed allows the layers to thicken by one more cycle. Is there evidence outside of ancient tradition that the blood moon specifically facilitates the kind of self-examination the traditions describe? The neurological evidence is directly relevant. Theta brainwave states produced through the pineal gland's melatonin response are associated with reduced prefrontal cortical activity. And the prefrontal cortex manages not only rational thought, but the psychological defense function that keeps uncomfortable self-knowledge below the threshold of conscious awareness. When prefrontal activity reduces during theta states, the material normally kept below the awareness line becomes accessible. What the traditions call shadow material, unexamined samskaras, the weight of the unexamined heart, these are describing the same neurological content that theta state reduction makes available. The blood moon facilitates this access through a documented biological mechanism. The convergence between ancient tradition and modern neuroscience does not mean the ancient seers were just observing neuroscience without vocabulary. The traditions were mapping something real. The neuroscience confirms the observation. But the observation was made first, with sufficient reliability across independent cultures and millennia, to generate entire initiatory systems built around it. When multiple civilizations with no communication between them independently develop systematic practices for the same astronomical window based on the same observed effects on human consciousness, the convergence is not coincidence. It is the accumulated empirical record of an observation consistent enough to organize entire cosmological frameworks around. The blood moon works. The mechanism now has language. The opportunity it opens has always been the same. Something brought you to this video in this window, not the algorithm alone, though the algorithm played its part. Something in the sequence of your choices over recent weeks and months brought you to a place where you were the kind of person who would seek this specific kind of content during a blood moon. That quality of seeking is itself a samskara being formed. The reaching toward genuine understanding, toward the mechanism beneath the ceremony, toward the teaching beneath the symbol, is part of what is being encoded right now. You are not passively consuming content about the Akashic Records. You are demonstrating, through the specific quality of your seeking, the quality of consciousness that the ancient seers described as the beginning of the writing. The quality of seeing the traditions describe has one specific property that is easy to misunderstand. It is not analytical. Analysis keeps the observer at a protected distance from the material being observed. What the traditions mean by witnessing is different, seeing from within the experience rather than above it, without the protective distance of explanation or the preemptive organization of judgment. A practitioner who brings pattern material to conscious attention during a blood moon window and immediately begins analyzing it, categorizing, theorizing about its origin, is doing something other than the practice. The practice is to see directly, to allow the pattern to be fully present in awareness without immediately reorganizing it into something manageable. That direct seeing, unmediated by analysis, is the samskara formation event. The Akashic field, across every tradition that genuinely preserved knowledge of it, was described as an active encoding substrate, not a passive receiver that stores everything with equal fidelity, but a responsive medium in which the depth of inscription is a direct function of the quality of consciousness doing the inscribing. What the blood moon window opens is not an archive you can browse or a database you can query. It opens the conditions under which writing goes unusually deep, where the ordinary threshold between conscious engagement and Akashic encoding is temporarily lowered by documented neurological and electromagnetic mechanisms. The field does not become more generous in these conditions. It becomes more accessible. What you bring to it with honest awareness in this window encodes more deeply than what you bring in ordinary states. Not because the field rewards effort, but because depth is a function of the quality of consciousness that the blood moon temporarily elevates. Consider what the ancient traditions are describing beneath the symbolic language. The question is not whether you are present in the Akashic Records. Some impression of you is already there. Every interaction with experience, regardless of the quality of consciousness brought to it, leaves some trace in the field. The surface impressions are real. What the traditions are describing is not a binary of presence versus absence from the records. It is a spectrum of depth. The question is whether what is encoded is sufficiently consolidated to constitute what the tradition calls a genuine name, a distinct and persistent signature in the field. The blood moon window is an opportunity to contribute to that depth, not to begin the record, to deepen what is already there. The Corpus Hermeticum, Greco-Egyptian philosophical texts assembled by Marsilio Ficino in the Italian Renaissance from sources dated to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, preserves a specific teaching on Akashic inscription in the text known as the Poimandres. The teaching distinguishes between those who achieve gnosis, direct experiential knowledge of the essential nature of consciousness, the kind that reorganizes the soul's relationship to itself permanently, and those in agnoia, the specific form of ignorance that consists of never having turned honest attention toward the self. Those who achieve gnosis leave an encoding in the divine mind that persists beyond the dissolution of the physical vehicle. Those in agnoia dissolve back into the field without distinction, not condemned, simply unorganized at the depth that would allow persistence. Are there signs that deep Akashic encoding has occurred? Markers that what was examined during a blood moon window went deep enough to constitute genuine inscription? The traditions offer a consistent answer, yes, and the signs are behavioral rather than experiential. When a pattern you have examined honestly during a high-access window no longer pulls you into the same unconscious reaction it generated before the examination, something has changed in the encoding. When the gap between what you know and how you actually behave begins to close, not because you are forcing it through willpower, but because the recognition itself reorganized the pattern at a level below conscious control. This is what the tradition means by written in stone. Not mystical experience, behavioral coherence emerging from genuine recognition. The sign your name is being written. Your name, as the ancient seers understood it, is not biographical. It is not the accumulation of your achievements, your roles, your relationships. Your name, in the Akashic sense, is the specific quality of consciousness that distinguishes your encoding from every other pattern in the field, the signature made by the particular way you have seen and engaged your life. The seers who studied the records described this signature as luminous and distinct for souls who had examined themselves with genuine honesty, like a flame that maintains its specific character even within a larger light, and dim and undifferentiated for souls who had lived in unconsciousness, a lamp whose wick was never properly trimmed, whose light never became steady or characteristic. The blood moon window is a trimming moment. What if you've spent most of your life in what the traditions call unconscious passage, on autopilot, accumulating surface impressions rather than deep samskaras? The ancient teachings are consistent on this point. The Akashic field does not operate on a threshold model that erases shallow prior encoding when conscious encoding begins. What changes is the weight of what is contributed going forward. A single blood moon window brought to genuine self-examination contributes more depth to the inscription than months of ordinary living. Not because the field rewards the effort, but because the quality of consciousness available in a high-access theta state combined with honest self-examination generates deeper samskaras than are available in ordinary conditions. Whatever has been encoded before, the depth you contribute now accumulates. The window is open. A scene returned to the scale. The heart on one side, the feather of Ma'at on the other. The Egyptian teaching holds that this weighing is not reserved for the moment of death. It occurs in every genuine moment of honest self-examination. Each moment of truly seeing yourself without the filters of self-flattery or self-condemnation, each moment of recognizing a pattern without the defensive distortions of explanation or blame, is a weighing of the living heart. The blood moon is a weighing window, not the final weighing, a living one, an opportunity offered by the specific astronomical conditions of this eclipse for the quality of self-examination that accumulates over time into a heart light enough to match the feather, not through perfection, not through spiritual accomplishment, through the accumulated weight of genuine seeing brought honestly to the field, in window after window, until what you are is fully written. The modern world has made the examined life systematically difficult. The constant stimulation of digital environments, the cultural premium on productivity and forward momentum, the speed of information flow that eliminates the gaps in which genuine reflection becomes possible, all of these work against the stillness in which honest self-examination can occur. The ancient traditions did not prescribe their practices in a world where stillness was natural or easy. They prescribed them precisely because stillness was difficult to sustain, and because specific astronomical windows offered something the world rarely provided voluntarily, a naturally occurring moment of neurological quiet in which the examined life became briefly, unusually possible. The blood moon is one of those windows. The ancient seers built systems around it because it was the world itself offering what ordinary life withholds. That offer is being extended again right now. If you stayed until the end, write in the comments, "My name is being written," and I've placed another lesson on your screen right now to take you one step deeper into this work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.